It's Irina, isn't it? Not Irina. It's Irina.
It's Irina, yes.
Irina, first of all, can I congratulate you on your book, Carpathia? I think it's long overdue. In our book, since we first filmed in Romania in 2006, it's a very different country now. I've always included Romanian recipes, but I think it's long overdue, and congratulations. There's some great recipes in it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time, for accepting to do this interview. I think, yes, it's long overdue, and I wanted this book to be a collection of recipes, my family recipes, and the way my mum used to cook, and my grandmother. My mum is from Transylvania, from Alba Iulia, right in the middle of Transylvania. And my father is from the south, so I had all sorts of, dishes in our family to eat. And I wanted the book to, first of all, be a collection of family recipes and to show people how we eat in Romania. Mm-hmm. And also I wanted to include dishes that people who travel to Romania, when this will be possible, they will recognize and they will find in Romanian restaurants, or if they are invited to dinner by a Romanian family. So I didn't want them to be something totally different than what we eat at the moment and how we eat in Romania.
Yeah, I think that's one of the knack about writing a cookbook, is making it accessible and interesting. One thing that struck me is, because most of my knowledge, I mean, I've been going to Romania now for nearly 20 years, and indeed, I think the family I'm very close to are in Maramureș in the north. And
yes.
Of course, like I believe I'm a kind of adopted son of Maramureș, and it's the food's very different in the book. But obviously, I don't know why I'm surprised. I mean, Romania is such a big country. It's diverse. It's culturally diverse, geographically diverse, and of course, the Maramureș food. A lot of it's different. I mean, I think, one book really isn't enough to do justice. I have several Romanian cookbooks, but none of them really, I haven't found them very good, to be honest, until this one. I don't know. I bought one book in an antique market in Bucharest in 2006, and it was a French cookbook from the pre-Ceausescu times, when yes. Bucharest was the Paris of the East, and I had it translated. Unfortunately, I've lost that. I paid a lot for the book, but that was really interesting, and I can see some elements of that whole book in some of your recipes. There's a freshness and a lightness to it. Like there is in some of your recipes. Most of the recipes I'm familiar with, it's quite heavy, kind of mountain working people's food. But it is such a huge melting pot of cultures, Romania, which is what I love about the country. It's like ours.
Yes. And also the title of the book, Carpathia, I wanted to reflect the heart of Romania and the heart of Romanian cuisine. The Carpathian Mountains, the mountain range, cleaves Romania into two, first of all. So you have the south and the east, and then you cross the mountains and you have Transylvania. But at the same time, the mountains shaped our history as well, and our communities and our traditions, and the food reflects that. So this is why I wanted to call it Carpathia, influenced by the name of the Carpathian Mountains. And as you say, even within one region like Transylvania, Maramureș is a special place. Yeah. It's very much in the north, there with the border with Ukraine and Poland. At some point it was Poland, and you can see the influences from their cuisines there, and also the diversity of the ethnic groups that we have in Romania as well. And I always, I think I said in the book as well, in the winter, we love to eat more like German, Hungarian, Saxon food. And in the summer, we all move outside because the summers are very hot. Yes. And we love food on the barbecue, and we love to barbecue vegetables and fish and meat as well. And it's a completely different lifestyle than in the winter. So we have two different nationalities in our cuisines, Germanic in the winter and Greek and Turkish in the summer.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? I mean, it's, of course, it's seasonality, and I think the seasons are very marked. I mean, I always look at the, you know, it's cold here, and I'll go. I said to my wife the other night, it was -1 where I'm in Kent. I said it's now -9 in Maramuresh, and then in the summer, you know, I'll say, "What? It's 25 degrees here. Oh, it's 35 in Maramuresh." Of course, the seasons are very well defined. But I know whenever I go there, the food in the north, the mamaliga is the staple carbohydrate,
Yes.
and potatoes. But I mean the mamaliga or polenta, as you know, it really is the carbohydrate of choice. And I think they're very hardworking people. It's lovely. I mean, my mother-in-law, when we had our the first lockdown last year, my mother-in-law came over to visit us. She lost her husband in November 2019, and we couldn't get out. I couldn't get out to see her, and then I got sick, so she came over. But fortunately for us, unfortunately for her, she got stuck here during lockdown, and she couldn't go back to Romania. Now she's, you know, she's in her 70s, very serious, very religious person, and it wasn't ideal for her. She couldn't speak English, but the food was funny, and slowly, after a while, because obviously I got to cook every day and I cook at home, but some of the food, she started joining with me and taking over.
Right.
And I learned a lot, you know, things like the bread. I know some of the bread doughs, one of the doughs that you make with the placinta to carne.
Yes.
Excuse my pronunciation. The dough's interesting with the sour cream, butter and plain flour.
Yeah.
And like her, when I was making bread, she couldn't understand why I didn't put milk and eggs in the bread.
Yes.
I suddenly realized, of course, she had unlimited milk. They had a cow, and she had chicken, she had eggs. So she always put milk and she liked the softness she got. So she didn't like my bread, which was crusty. And I suddenly began to realize that. And she also taught me how to make pasta. You know,
Yes.
noodles, it was second nature. But due to poverty, I mean, her noodles, it was just flour and water, no eggs.
Yes. Yes.
But I was going, no, you need eggs. It's 100 grams of flour, and and to be fair, her pasta was thinner and better than mine. It is interesting, but there again, the bread, and I've just done a new program. I put eggs and milk because I wanted a really soft bread. So I think the food world, you're constantly learning. One thing I've learned as well is from your book, I want to try is it Borscht?
Borscht, yes.
Yeah. That's fascinating for a brand.
It is, and it's different than the Russian or Ukrainian borscht. Most people associate borscht with the beetroot broth that is served in Ukraine and Russia. In Romania, first of all, borscht is an ingredient. We ferment wheat bran and cornmeal as well. We add a slice of toast, and we add herbs, and we ferment all this, and then we use the liquid to add the sour element to a broth or to a stew, and we even drink it. I mean, in my family, we used to drink it on an empty stomach because it's very healthy, and people now, you can see that they go back to these traditions and to traditional way of eating, and go back to fermentation and fermented foods because everything is very healthy. So obviously we add this broth, this liquid to a broth at the end of the cooking process. And we obviously, we keep all the probiotics and all the goodness in it, and we eat it with this broth. So a borscht in Romanian cuisine is a whole category of broths, and it's a course in itself. It's served between the starters and the main course. And I think you've noticed in Romania that a Romanian table is a feast. You get so many dishes, and they all have, in a way, different influences. And you eat through so many cultures and nationalities by eating at the Romanian table.
I think certainly it's a little bit like the cucina povera down in Italy. It is some aspects of it, it's a cuisine that's born out of being poor culture. You know, the people hardworking, and some ways it's the better for it. I mean, like fermenting some bran and toast, and you find you get this wonderful sourness, you know, to your soups. It's that little bit of gastronomy that I love, you know, and I will be doing it. The one with beans and smoked meat.
Yes.
That's something I really look forward to eating, and I know it's a taste that I've had in Romania, and as my in-laws, there's one family, it's Ilia and Anieta. I've had the soup, the ciorbă de fasole at her house, and it has a flavour that I haven't been able to get, and now I understand. And my wife said, "No, it's the Borscht. No, you know, Anieta makes it." I go, "Why didn't you tell me? You know, I'd have stolen that one." But yeah, you're right about the platter. You know, like the buffet, as it almost. I know Christmas in Romania. In Maramureș, everybody's house is the same. It's the obviously samali, the schnitzel, the salata de boeuf,
yes,
mamaliga. But every house has exactly the same repertoire.
And all the sausages and all the charcuterie, because we have still the tradition of slaughtering a pig in December. So we can have everything on the table for Christmas, yes.
Yeah, but it's good. I mean, I did a Romanian Christmas Eve once, because up in the north, the porcini mushrooms, of course, to me, I drive along and I go, he's selling porcini. And yes, and they're the most wonderful porcini mushrooms, straight from the forest. You know, they don't cost much. And then I said, well, yeah, he said, you know, my mother-in-law dries them, but she also freezes them. And I was saying, you shouldn't freeze mushrooms. My mother does anyway. They blanch them for 2 or 3 minutes, and we freeze them. But they were like breeze blocks. They were brick-sized, you know, blocks of porcini were stored in the freezer. And one Christmas Eve, Ilya and Annette, I remember that their smoked sausage is just unbelievably good.
Yes.
You know, and I just got the porcini. I cooked them down with some garlic, some herbs, and some smetana, which I can never pronounce.
Smetana, yes.
Some smetana, and we had that with the smoked sausage, and I baked some bread. Oh, by God, it was good.
This is delicious.
Oh, yeah, but it was funny, the porcini mushrooms, I don't know what's going to happen now after Brexit. God, that was a stupid thing. But I've had these breeze block side chunks of porcini mushrooms in my suitcase, coming back wrapped in newspaper, and they've kept me going for the year. When people come to my house, where'd you get these mushrooms from? Yeah, they are expensive.
It is, you know, you're absolutely right about cucina povera. Because first of all, Romanian cuisine, the peasant cookery in the countryside, is a poor cuisine, but also reflects the seasonality and sustainability. Like you said, your mother-in-law has, you know, the cow in the garden, in the yard, and the tomatoes in the garden, and the eggs from the chicken. So we use what we have, what we grow and rear. So this is kind of and I noticed that you say that in your latest book, in the vegetarian book, that sustainability and seasonality brings more balance into our diets.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I love that about the vegetarian dishes that you have in your book.
Yeah, we tried to in the new veggie book. I mean, it's our 24th book, and so we, you know, Si and I have been so lucky over the years. Because we've been at 20 years now since, we started the Bikers, but we've been lucky. We spent that time writing and exploring food. You know, we've never had to run a restaurant. We've never had that stress or that commitment. And it's been, we're still on this most wonderful adventure. And I think like the vegetarian food, moving with the time, it's very much part of it, you know. But, you know, you go to a Romanian market, you know, the peppers are there. They're in the north. I mean, the old ladies selling the paprika and the tiny little garlic and everything. But everything's got its very specific place. It's what you have and doing it to the best. I remember my mother-in-law's gardener, and I was sitting there one morning, having my coffee, and she always would do me red peppers from the garden and some cheese and tomato, and I'm there with coffee in a jug, you know, straight through a strainer, lovely black coffee, and I heard this noise in the garden, and there was a horse and plough in the garden, and twice a year, the horse and plough would go down the street. It would turn over the soil for people, the old people to plant the potatoes, and then it'd come back again in the autumn for about 50p, and it'd turn it over. So that day you harvest all the potatoes. And of course, it's just fantastic to me. I mean, it's not going to happen in Bucharest, but that kind of cycle that's gone on for years. And I think during Ceausescu's time, like in Maramuresh, they were lucky because they had some food, they could produce their own food. And,
yes.
And funnily enough, my mother-in-law this year, because families look after one another, and some younger members of families have moved in with her, so they've gone back and they've got a pig again. And it's wonderful.
It's so important, and you're right. I mean, in the city, you can't rear a pig, or you know, and you can't necessarily grow the amount of vegetables that you need to feed your family. So during the communist regime, I think cities were more exposed to lack of food and, you know, I wouldn't say starvation, but close to that, than in the countryside, where you still had and you were allowed to have a little garden and you could grow there, you know, the vegetables needed. But most of most of the families in Romania, they, one way or another, they had members of the family in the countryside. Mm-hmm. Like we had our uncle in Transylvania, he reared a pig for us. Well, that pig that was slaughtered in December was putting food on the table, even in April, because otherwise the shops didn't have any meat, any food to eat. Yes. And also in a way that the same regime, in a way, forced us to eat seasonally. I don't think that when I grew up, I had tomatoes in December, you know, there was nothing about, or aubergines. We love aubergines in Romania. Oh, yeah. And we didn't have aubergines in December or November. And the whole ethos of seasonality actually inspired and created a whole cuisine for preserving, because you knew that you were not going to get the aubergines in the winter, so you had to preserve them. Yeah. And you find ways to preserve cabbage as well, and we have our sauerkraut, Romanian sauerkraut, that we preserve as a whole cabbage instead of shredded. Yes. So, you know, and then we use the leaves to make sarmale, the rolled cabbage leaves. So making jams as well, you know, we have and confitures, because I think we love confitures more than jams. You know, we put fruit straight in the sugar syrup rather than cooking the sugar with the fruit at the same time. Yeah. And then we also have another way to preserve fruit, especially, is to air dry them and cold smoke them. So smoked prunes, smoked apricots, smoked cherries. These will later on be added to even to savory dishes. I mean, we have a famous pilaf with smoked prunes.
I've seen that in the book. Yeah. Yes. I want to do that one. Yeah.
I cooked it in a little differently than what we do at home.
Yes.
Just to make it more accessible, more doable for our readers. But also I wanted to include a method that you can smoke ingredients in your own home. You don't need a special equipment to do that. So I put that in the method. So obviously, especially with vegan and vegetarian dishes, it is important to have different layers of flavor, as you know, and how you put it in your book as well. So sourness from borscht, sourness from sauerkraut, or fermented tomatoes, gogonele, like we say in Romania. Yeah. Plus the smokiness from smoked fruit or smoked cheese, smoked, you know, vegetables. They all build those flavors and make vegetarian and vegan food delicious.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, and the more you talk, it's strange, isn't it? Now a lot of these techniques are very foodie and very sophisticated. It's funny, it's like the Koreans have got away with kimchi now. It's a global brand. Well, the Romanians have been doing it, all the cabbage for years. I mean, I found myself in the book fermenting tomatoes. But again, that's something I picked up from my wife. But this year we fermented and pickled. We're in our vegetable garden. We fermented and pickled everything. But what we'll do, we've got jars. So in the winter, yes, we can get fresh vegetables. But sometimes we cooked a pork dish last night with lots of paprika. I mean, in the north, paprika is huge. It's in everything. It was like a pork paprikash, but we'll just have a big bowl of lightly fermented or lightly pickled vegetables, but it adds to the flavor, it adds to it. But you're right. I mean, with the veggie cookbook, we approached it. We didn't want to do a lot of side dishes. The meals had to have the texture and the levels of flavor, and they had to be satisfying to non-meat eaters. But again, it's just about, there's no mystery, is it? It's just a balanced diet, and it's accepting everything that you've got around you and the influences as well from around the world. I think that's one of the riches of the UK. You know, I obviously I'm married to Romanian, and I have a house in France, so the Brexit thing's a bit of a pickle for me, really. It's and I do worry becoming a little island, you know, because that hasn't been what we've been about for, you know, hundreds of years. You know, we've accepted culture from all over the world. Now cuisine, it's such a it's a 20th century kind of hodgepodge, but but it's an exciting place to be on the food front. You know, I think it's great that Romanian food's part of it. But it is that there's a lot of people, I think Romania who've never been there or don't know Romanians, they think they're liking it to Russia. They think it's an Eastern European country, very grey. And I have to explain, no, it's like a Latin heart. You know, the language is ancient. It's the closest language to Latin. It's fresh. There's a vitality coming in from the east, from Turkey. There's the strength. It's a very unique country, and I always encourage people. But when we very first filmed there, I think that the program went on in 2006, and I think it was a surprise to a lot of people because for motorcycling, go through the Carpathian mountains, and then in 2006 the roads were pretty rough. It was the best, you know. The hospitality was unbelievably good. The food was great. It was simple. But it was unique. We tried to show that about Romania and show that there's a freshness and a lightness to it. And, you know, it's colourful.
Yes, like you see.
Absolutely, yeah.
With Romanian blouse. You know, this is exactly, and I'm so glad you said, you mentioned our Latin heart, because this is, again, I noticed that people are very surprised because we are basically surrounded by Slavic countries, apart from Hungary, which is in a total different group. But we are not surrounded. We don't have a border with a Latin country. But however, and through history, we have different rulers, like the Ottoman Empire, you know, we had the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but we managed through those centuries to keep our Latin heart and our Latin language. Basically, if you know Romanian, you can speak Italian and Spanish in like overnight, because we have so much in common with Latinity, this base of languages. And in a way, we are the same with the cuisine as well. You know, we have, in a way, the Mediterranean influences, like we eat the meze starters. They are all different little plates or dips with salads and cheese and fresh vegetables. And also, even when we eat meat, and when we eat meat in the summer on the grill, the side dish is always a sort of salad. It's never, they are never necessarily potatoes or something starchy. In the winter, yes, we eat polenta, because it's such a staple ingredient, and again goes back to the poverty of Romanians. You know, in the 16th century, when it was cornmeal was introduced by the Ottoman Empire, and it was such a good grain plant to grow because the yield is better than the wheat, and also it's very adaptable. Mountain or flat plain, it doesn't matter, you have a good harvest. And also for a while, the grain, because it was new, it wasn't taxed. So people didn't pay taxes on it. So obviously they were even more encouraged to grow maize. And then it absolutely spread. And the beauty of maize, especially today, is that it's gluten-free. So you have a very satisfying and delicious flavor carrier, because this is what it does. And it's gluten-free as well. So, you know, for those people who can't have and can't eat gluten, then cornmeal it's an amazing alternative. And look at Romania, you know, it has been cooking and eating polenta, mamaliga for centuries.
Yeah, I remember when I first came to London, and it was something about the 1980s, early 80s, going to the Italian trattorias. Oh, it's great polenta. It's so sophisticated, you know, and it's feeling very posh. Now, of course, you know, you realise that it's been around for thousands of years. Like one of my favourite dishes when I go home, I ask my mother-in-law to do, and again, apologise for my pronunciation. The mamaliga bronza, and she layers it with like the mamaliga with smoked meat, either ribs or sausage, and then cheese on the top, and the fat from the sausage. I mean, it's not particularly good for your diet, but by God, it's good. And just with that and some raw peppers on the side, like you say, a salad, it's absolutely glorious. Again, that's sometimes what I've done as well is the recipes that my favorite ones, if they fitted in with what we do as the hairy bikers. I've always told the story where the recipes come from, but we've used an awful lot of the Romanian recipes in our recipes. Even the Kievs, like the chicken Kievs that my wife makes.
Yes.
The way she does the herb and the butter, and chills like a baguette of the butter, then flattens the chicken and rolls it. Or in the north, I always remember one of the things that made me laugh. It was in the restaurants. I wonder what a chicken Gordon Bleu was. And it was written Gordon Bleu, the name.
Yes.
Of course, it was a chicken cordon bleu, but it was a Gordon Bleu, and somehow it got through to Maramoresh, and the chicken with the ham and the cheese.
Yes,
it was wonderful culture.
It's so funny.
We
need to start to preserve traditional recipes and go back to some traditional recipes that got lost through, let's say, political turmoil or political regimes, political choices. And we probably lost a lot of our traditional way of cooking when, you know, almost 60 years of, you know, communist regime, if we don't count only the Ceausescu regime, just after the Second World War, you know. So, but also we're still losing a lot of this through modernization of the countryside, through the influences of chefs trained abroad. So, like you said, with cordon bleu, you know, this is definitely something that came probably in the 20th century. So it's important to evolve, and it's important to bring new techniques and flavors, but it's also important to go back to our roots and also to discover those family recipes and regional recipes that are part of our culture. And I'm very happy to see that in Romania, so many people, whether entrepreneurs or restaurateurs or photographers and even social media influencers, because they are important nowadays, they go back to the countryside. They make a little video of something that is made in an old house by, you know, an old lady following her grandmother recipe and stuff like that. These are very important to our identity as a nation, to be a bit of both, to bring to life old recipes, but also to modernize them and make them relevant to today's lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Romania is no less, in a modern world, people are interested in food and culture. And if you have the, you know, it's funny, isn't it? it is a luxury really to eat out, to experiment with food rather than just surviving. And I think, you know, Romania's had a rough time in the 20th century, you know, politically, and then after the war, it was torn apart. After World War I, it was torn apart. And I think one of the problems now is I always think that Romania's greatest export is its people, which is a shame because there's so many youngsters that they go away to work to build a life. But I know, like my stepchildren, whenever we go back to Maramuresh, that there's some very, very strong cultural roots, which they do celebrate, and customs. It is important to preserve those as well. And of course, the food is part of it. But no, I think, again, you've done a great job with this book. It's interesting, exciting. And what I think about it, maybe because there's a lot of it that's fresh and new as well, and very relevant to how we cook and eat, you know, in a modern world. I say, yes, mentioning the pickling, and some of the desserts I find fascinating. You know, but yeah, it's
the papanash. Did you have papanash in Maramuresh? You know, the donuts with jam and sour cream.
Yeah, they're more like the langosh. They do a placinta.
Yes.
I mean, they make them like the sweet, the savoury ones. All I know is that I just think. I mean, I've written the 6 because side I got colossally fat. We ended up like the food world. We've always been honest. It's been a progression, and when we had to do some diet books because we got morbidly obese, you know. And I remember once going back, I was in the middle and I was doing I've done all right with the diet. I've kept it off and I'm still alive, because there was a point when about 10 years ago, I thought, if I carry on like this, I'm going to be dead. I was embracing what I was learning far too much. And I can remember going back to Romania, and because I'd lost weight, that seemed an excuse for the family to feed me up. And then of course, the chinta came, and they were with sour cream and dill. And then the ones with jam, and I'm going, I can't. Oh, go on then. I'll go into the market in Siget. And again, there's a lady there that ran the market stall. I think because I couldn't speak Romanian, and you know, it's like my wife would go, her old friends are there, and they're talking. So they just kept feeding me to shut me up, put me in a corner. I got to say, I'm not a lamb, but anyway, go on then. And oh God, but it was so good. You know, and that's when my mother-in-law was over here. You know, she would cook as well. I cooked with her. We did some things for I was doing some stuff for Instagram, and just some cookery things. And my mother-in-law, she didn't realize she'd been filmed. She just came in and shoved me out the way. And she was very good. I think she became a bit of a character, really. But no, it's wonderful. I mean, I know there's a book I love. It's an Italian book called Pasta Grannies. Some YouTube videos of the nonnas and gone around and their little techniques for pasta dishes. And that's a book now. It's a book I use as well. And but again, it's these old-fashioned recipes, but they're so kind of pure. And it's just so good, and it's really relevant. The funny thing is, though, it's like you were talking about the fermenting and the pickling. If you get like smoked prunes, if you went to a Michelin-starred restaurant and you saw smoked prunes with your chicken, say, you think, well, that's very sophisticated, but it's just good education.
Yes, it's inspired by, you know, the fact that in Romania we have very good summers, so obviously vegetables, fruit that are very full of flavor. So obviously you want to preserve that. But it's funny how you said that people used to, when you go to Maramuresh and you go back to Romania, people feed you all the time. Yeah. Because this is part of our mentality. Yes. Food for us is first of all is, yes, I know it's nourishing, but it's about love. It's a measure of love, and also it's we are always concerned that our guests or people that are in the family or come and visit us in the house are hungry. So we make sure, first of all, that they had something to eat. Even now with my husband, I keep asking him, you know, first time when he comes back from work, I say, are you hungry? Let's have something to eat. Or when he comes back, he traveled, you know, and comes back. First of all, it's food. I put food on the table, and I need to make sure that he's fed first, and then we'll talk about the day and everything. it's a constant worry for us that
Yeah.
people around us didn't have enough to eat.
Yeah, and of course that love around the dinner table is fueled by palinca or tweaker.
Yes.
That's been an education. I mean, there are an awful lot of people with stills up in Maramuresh who make their own, including a lot of my in-laws. But it's, you know, I suppose it's cheaper than wine, but it does encourage the appetite somewhat.
It's also because, again, we have a lot of fruit around, and we need to tweak, you know, the plum brandy or the fruit brandy. It's a bit of a way of preserving, right?
Oh, it tickled me, I tell you.
You turn it into something else.
Yeah, but again, it's part of that. It's part of getting around the table, embracing life, embracing each other, and again, it's what I say to people who've never been to Romania. It's the warmth there. I mean, I have travelled in Russia, and I like Russia. Actually, the people have been very generous with me, but there isn't that immediate warmth. You go into a Romanian household, there is a warmth there. It's a very hospitable country to travellers, and I've found that, you know, when I've been on my own or when I've been with Sai, we turn up somewhere, and the hospitality we've had has been great. Without the cameras, without a Romanian speaker with us, we've always travelled well. We've drum bun, you know, we've always travelled well in Romania. And of course, on the food front, I think the Romanian weddings as well. That's an event that I think is globally different. I think by about day 2, I mean, Somali's different. You see, like your Somali, you do a tomato sauce.
Yes.
The Somali in Maramuresh, nobody'd ever put tomatoes in with the Somali. But I love the fact all the ladies, they're very competitive with a Somali.
Yes.
And there's one lady I had the stupidity to say, I get a Somali, they're the best. And that was it. You know, it's like Somali wars. But I remember before a wedding, I spent a day, I managed to join in with the ladies, building the big pot of Somali. And it was joyous, you know, just sitting in the kitchen. And they would you know, they would always get me a nip of palinca to keep me going, stuff like that. But by God, this pot of Somali, by about day 3, at the bottom, was so good.
Yes, slow cooked, also almost caramelized.
Yeah, and they put, every so often they'll put the fatty sausage in there.
Yes.
With the Somali, say no tomatoes. They put some broth in, the sauerkraut water, which I suppose is their version of the Borscht.
Yes.
And then every so often there'll be peppers that are stuffed with a Somali mixture as well, little peppers.
Yes.
So it goes into this massive pot.
It's glorious. It's, you know, it's delicious when they all cook together like this, all the flavors, you know, infuse, and it's beautiful. But I'm glad you mentioned the weddings. You know, that can be a book in itself, basically, because you know, the whole amount of dishes and all the traditions and superstitions as well related to how you break the bread and how many crumbs you have is how many kids you'll have, and all sorts of things like that, scary things. And
it's not as scary as stealing the bride, though.
Oh, yes. Oh, God. And actually, the Romanian style of cooking, not necessarily only eating, but cooking the dishes, is a social experience. Yeah. We come together to cook dishes. And, you know, even when you bake bread in the countryside, women come together at someone's house and use one oven, but actually it's a social experience as well. You know, they get to chat, they get to spend time together. And this is also the way we cook in the cities, because obviously I grew up in Bucharest, in the capital. So I grew up in a small, like 40 square meters apartment, which is tiny for 4 people. Well, 5 people, because my grandmother, my dad's mom, used to spend the winters with us. So 5 people in 1-bedroom apartment, you know, it was quite small. But we gathered in the kitchen, which was tiny, to actually help mom to cook, because mom used to work 6 days a week, so including Saturdays. She used to look after us, like four members of the family, you know. So we needed to help her, but also to spend time with her, to be with her in the kitchen. And in a way, in Romania, this is how girls learn to cook. Not necessarily saying, okay, mom, teach me how to cook. We spend time together with our mothers and grandmothers, and this is how we learn different dishes. And also, because of that, every recipe is quite personal. You can't say to someone, this is better than yours. You offend the whole family line. You kind of...
Yeah, you see, the Italians haven't got the monopoly on this. You know,
No.
Romania is equally as possessive of their food culture. So the thing is, we talked an awful lot, and it's predominantly about the ladies who cook, and I found that too. And funny what you said about Somali. I know in Maramuresh, there's a song they sing when they're making a Somali for a wedding, and we're joining. But what we're going to do about the Romanian men? Do they cook now? Does the modern Romanian man embrace it? So remember when my in-laws first came over to stay with us for Christmas, it's natural for me to cook.
Yes.
What I do. And my father-in-law looked at me as though I was some peculiar weirdo. The fact that I was making a living from it was kind of, that was a plus point. So he can't be all bad. He's managing to make money out of it. But the fact that I was putting food on the table was just a bit crazy. So do you think, are modern Romanian men embracing their food culture that they have?
They are, and I think they have been, but it's more about barbecues. So look, it's the same like in the UK.
Everyone's Gordon Ramsay when it's faced with a barbecue.
Yes. So it's a lot about cooking outside. They like to cook, they be in charge of the barbecue. But also when we also cook for the public, I don't know, for public gatherings, some men get involved in that as well, especially when it's something related to meat. Perhaps not rolling sarmale, but when you have a whole roast to feed a village, men are usually in charge of that. It's kind of interesting from the cultural point of view when it's something, a public festivity, men are seen to be cooking. Yes. And yes, but dad had his signature dish was a sort of stew, slow cooked, but we didn't necessarily want to encourage him to make it too often, because for dad was more important the whole process, and the slow cooking was very important. Yes. So it didn't matter if we had to eat at 1 o'clock because we were all hungry. If the stew wasn't ready, we had to wait. And we were like, no, we want to eat now.
Yeah, so years ago we did a series in the UK. We did 2 series quite successful called Mums Know Best, and it was great because it was mums who were really kind of keen cooks. They had a dish that there was their warhorse, as one woman explained, but it was great because it meant that within the UK it crossed generations, cultures. It was fantastic. And Si and I often said, like 10 years on from that series, we'd like to do one called Dads Know Best now, because again, it's like you said, your father had his signature dish, his show-off dish, and a lot of dads, loads of men cook, full stop. And a lot of men I know are the main cooks in the family because they enjoy it, which is great. But I think dads know best to be good because, again, it could be any culture, it could be any generation, it could be dads who are gay who cook. I think that would be a really interesting series and some good recipes. But I have to mention again, it's my in-laws, Agneta. There were 4 brothers, Florin, the names Petra, Florin, Danny, and the 4th brother's going to kill me if I forget his name. Agneta was such a, see, Ilya, who was the father, he was a gardener. So he grew up food. That was his job. Like the carrots were, they were stored over the winter. So they had to store the carrots in sand carrot and everything. But Agneta was the cook, but the boys all cook. And I remember we filmed a series called Vacation, and one of the episodes was in Romania. We filmed at their house, and by God, I was proud of them. They had their outdoor kitchen, and Agneta was the one who did the baking. Like you said, they'd made the sausages, the barbecue. but you know, they've done that. And I've been round to their house in the winter, and when it's been frozen like -10, they'll dig a big hole in the ice, put logs in there and a cooking pot, you know, with beans and sausage over that fire in the snow. And I got to admit, like, drinking around that fire with the cousins, with the 4 brothers and the children. It's just joyous because you're getting drunk, and the beans and the sausage, which is the most perfect thing when you're kind of feeling tiddly.
Yes.
And then there comes a point where all the men, it's fun enough, that was very much the men who were cooking then. That big pan goes into the house, and the ladies are there, and we're all kind of starry-eyed and hungry, and they serve the ladies. And it's occasions like that are so memorable and so special, really. And then, you know, family. I've cooked Christmas dinner twice now in Romania. Once was nearly a catastrophe. I drove to Romania. This is many years ago, and I went through. I drove through Hungary, and I bought 2 big loins of pork because I knew there's no point taking turkey. It wasn't a culture.
No.
These 2 loins of pork, and I bought a couple of sides of smoked salmon. And so I thought I'll put them in the car. It was frozen, so it was fine. And my wife said, "You cooking Christmas dinner?" Yeah, okay, fine. Anyway, we went to see one of my father-in-law's brother, who he traded with horses, and he made his own palinca. So we started drinking, and the old men were drinking, and servus, sanatate, and it was going down. It got to 6 o'clock at night, and I thought, well, all right, so I've got this wrong. Maybe Christmas dinner's Boxing Day, so never mind. I just let loose. And so by about 7 o'clock, I was in love with the world. And my wife said to me, "We have to go back now. You're cooking Christmas dinner." I said, "What? I can't." I got back to the house at 7:30. I said, "What time are we eating?" And she said, "Well, people are coming about 10 o'clock. How come no? I remember all my mother-in-law and the ladies, they went and got the potatoes, peeling potatoes. They were all wood burning, like the big stufas. I did 2 loins of pork. I made little canapes with the smoked salmon. And I said, "How many are coming?" She said, "About 40.
What?
And the best thing was everybody came, the 2 loins of pork with the roast potatoes, some veggies. And it was most glorious. I got away with it. But these canapes, it was just toast with smoked salmon, and it was a treat for everybody, really. But then there was a band turned up as well at 11 o'clock. It was 4 musicians, and by God, that was a memorable night.
Yeah.
But the next Christmas when I was cooking, I had the measure of this. So earlier on Christmas Eve, I got about 40 chicken portions, stuffed them with smoked sausage and bacon, so I could just put them in the oven.
Wow.
But it's something I've got to do again, actually.
What a feast. And it's always this, you know, we always bring music to the table. It's we combine the 2 of, you know, drinking, eating, and listening to music. And especially it's always folk music, so traditional music. And even we dance, you know, our traditional dances. So it's a beautiful experience as a whole. It's not just eating, you know, and enjoying some wine or suica, palinca.
Yes.
It's the whole, you know, having people, a family together and singing. And a lot of people, even if they are not professional singers or they don't play an instrument, they know a lot of the traditional songs and dances. And it's beautiful, because I know from my mom, when we used to go to my uncle in Transylvania, all of a sudden someone starts to sing something, and someone else makes, you know, does a little dance and everything. And it's all very connects you to your history, to your family, to your land, to everything, you know. It all comes together in a very inspiring way, I would say. You know, I feel very inspired, especially now since I moved to the UK and I lived here for almost 12 years now. When I go home, it's so, everything has a different meaning now to me. Everything is more important. Everything is even more delicious. Everything is more beautiful, because and only when I came to live here, so the distance between the UK and Romania actually made me go back to Romanian food and appreciate it more, something that probably I took for granted when I was at home.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden was very meaningful to me, helped me with this transition from living in Romania to living here in the UK. And my husband is British, so I cooked British dishes, and then I started to cook Romanian, and all of a sudden he is actually, you know, he loves sauerkraut, he loves gogonele, he loves slanino, you know, the Romanian lardo we cure and smoke. So he's very much has a Eastern European, you know, a Romanian palate now, and love the potato bread. He loves that. That is also, you know, in Romania we bake that in cabbage leaves. We don't use
recipe. It looks
we don't use a baking tin. Actually, the cabbage leaves around the dough hold the bread together, and you put it in the outdoor oven, and you bake a beautiful bread like this, and then you scrape the cabbage leaves off, and the bread is beautiful. It has a beautiful crust, but not very firm. But the crumb, like you say, is very soft because it has the potatoes. And this obviously traditionally to add potatoes was a sort of a way to make the flour, you know, go for longer, you know. So you, again, it's inspired by, let's say, a poor cookery style, or even if we put cornmeal.
We cooked, when we were filming in Germany, we made a potato bread there, and with potato and rosemary. We put rosemary in it, and it was delicious. But when we were doing the diet series of books, we were looking to make a lower calorie pastry, and we found out by putting mashed potatoes, obviously not with butter or anything, we made pastry with a large proportion of potatoes, and actually it was very soft and crumbly. But calorie-wise, it was actually better for you. It had less calories than the pastry that would be in a regular pie. I think one thing that I think we've lost our way here is with Easter as a celebration.
Yes.
In the United Kingdom, you know, I found out now that people will schedule me to work over Easter, and I kind of got used to it over the years. But since I've been with my wife, of course, Easter on the food front as well, it's so important to her, and it's so important to Romanians, you know, the Pascha. But again, there's a whole food culture around Easter too.
Yes, a lot of traditions, and because Easter is, in my view, Easter is more important than Christmas even. As an Orthodox country, Easter is very, very important. And also we eat obviously seasonally. So lamb is a seasonal meat. So we eat it mostly at Easter, and then we don't eat lamb. We usually eat mutton during the year, but at Easter we eat lamb. And you buy half of lamb and you just cook everything that's in that half, you know, not just the leg or the shoulder, or, you know, you prepare everything. Or you buy a whole lamb, depending on the size of the family, or two. But you actually prepare everything, including the head. The head goes in a borscht, to be honest, and it's quite popular. But also, you know, the Pascha, and I put a recipe in my book to made it very kind of easy to make in a way, but it's a brioche, basically, dough. And with cheese, that cheese in the middle is absolutely delicious. It's silky, it's a little tangy as well. It's amazing. But the whole thing, even if you are not a religious person and you don't go to church on a daily basis, Easter is a time when everyone gets a bit religious. We go on Easter Eve, we all go to church. Before midnight.
And you're there outside the church with my basket, with my food and everything, and my bottle as well. And then we go back to the house and eat it. It's funny, it's a celebration, but it's very serious, you know. It's a very serious message, but it's a glorious atmosphere outside the church. I know my wife gets, I don't know, it's like my mother-in-law, if my stepchildren can't get home for Easter, it's it's a very important thing. It's a terrible thing they can't. What you do for Easter, you know?
Yes.
It's very important. Like you say, it's important we keep these traditions. And a lot of the feast days, food is very, very important and very specific.
Yes. And has a lot of meaning as well, because it's a traditional food and also religious food.
Yeah.
You know, braiding the kozonak, it's a bit like, you know, the hands in prayer, for instance, or the hands, you know, hugging someone. That's the significance of the braid. And the rest, you know, going to church on Easter Eve, it's beautiful how everyone knows a little bit of that religious song we sing at midnight.
Yeah.
But it's also, you know, the whole thing comes after a very long period of Lent. Lent is almost 40 days, 44 days. And Lent is dotted around a year in Romanian culture. So it's not only Lent before Christmas or Easter, it's Lent even on a weekly basis. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are Lent days. So you can actually go vegan if you want to be, you know, really strict. But there are Lent days or weeks before Saint days, dotted around the year. So it can be March or August, or, you know, it doesn't have to. So again, that's really interesting because it brings us back to the meat-vegetable balance that we need to strike nowadays, and don't eat meat every day. And I didn't grow up with meat every day at all. It was just, you know, in the Sundays or weekend days. And it's important that we eat according to the seasons, but also in Romania, we eat according to religious traditions. And this is fascinating because we're still keeping those traditions.
Yeah, and there is a logic to it as well. I mean, I was thinking at Easter, I mean, we got the simnel cake that we used to make at Easter, and the balls of marzipan on the top for the 12 apostles. But we seem to have lost that, you know, and now it's, you know, it's chocolate eggs. But
yes, and Easter buns. But you can find Easter buns even now in the shop sometimes. So they're not special anymore, you see, if you eat Easter buns all the time.
Yeah, it isn't special. I mean, I remember on Good Fridays when I was a kid, my father would go to the bakery and bring them back, and we just had them once a year, and there was something special about that. Like you said, like lamb, it's funny because it's part of, it's one of the meats I'll eat.
Yes.
But I know my Romanian family, but it's not Easter, and it's similar. Like we don't really think about eating turkey.
Yes.
Christmas, other than, well, we might buy a portion of turkey mince for health. But no, it's about balance. I mean, we used to have in our country, it was fish on Fridays. But again, it's all part of that kind of logic to a healthy diet. I mean, I think with our veggie book, what I'm trying to get back to myself is the way I used to eat when I was a kid. Whereas meat was valued, a chicken was 3 meals. You know, 3 meals for a family of 3. And we still do that, you know, the bones, the broth, you know, the meat, and it's respected. And I think in a funny sort of way, isn't it strange that we've known about it all along? That's the way to look after ourselves and to look after the planet. And with a little bit of fermentation, you know, thrown in, it's actually pretty healthy.
And a bit of tweaker as well.
Yes, I remember my mother-in-law, when I'd had too much tweaker, because my father-in-law used to like a good drink, and I couldn't keep up with him. He was a man he'd been in industry all his life. He sadly passed away last November, but I would describe as a bear of a man, you know, strong man who had a phenomenal capacity. And I would go with him to the local bar, and I couldn't speak, but I had like pictures of his grandchildren, the graduates, so we'd show the pictures around the pub, and I'd be trying to keep pace with him. And one morning I woke up and my mother-in-law looked at me and thought, no, I was a mess. And she just gave me this, like a big pot of sour milk.
Yes.
To sort me out. And, you know, I think the base was, if I managed to keep it down, I'd be all right. And I thought he'd even got that covered, you know, in her own quiet way. There was everything, really. And a lot of the
sorry, go on.
A lot of the old folk remedies in Romania as well for health seem to work. You know, I know if I've got a cold or something, I'll be wrapped in vinegar, which doesn't mean doesn't make me very, very kind of palatable to share a bed with, but it does seem to work very well. And just, you know,
if you give them, they will give you garlic and vinegar, and here we go, go to bed. But actually, my grandmother, the one in the south, my dad's mom, she used to make, first of all, a sort of a mulled suica. So you boil it, but not exactly boil it, but because you don't want the alcohol to evaporate completely. And you put black ground pepper in it. Yes. And that's a good remedy for cold. If if you're ill, you get a bit of that. But also my grandmother, she had a recipe for a cup of coffee with rum and an egg yolk. Nice. I mean, you can see how that can save you, so and it wasn't for kids, but I think sometimes she gave us a little bit of that to save us. And so we have mulled wine as well, exactly like in the UK. We have that, and as a remedy for a cold. Yes. So and it's interesting, like you said about the sour milk, because in Romania we eat a lot of fermented dairy, and we also drink yogurt. It's just thinner than what you find in the shops in the UK, but you drink it. It's a sort of yogurt, and we drink kefir as well, which is nowadays very popular, and you see it everywhere in the shops. But also we use mântână, like you mentioned before, the sour cream. And also, it's not only this fermented dairy is also an ingredient. So you put it in doughs, for instance, when you make pastry. Yeah, I see the one where you've got stuff with meat. And cakes as well. Yes. You add it to cakes. So that makes a very soft crumb, very delicate cake. It's very nice. So they are not only for eating directly as they are, but also they are an ingredient, and also something to add a little flavor to a soup, for instance, which is not, when it's not very, how can I say, when you don't have meat in a soup, for instance, we put egg yolk with the sour cream, and you temper it, you put the hot soup on this cold mixture, and then you put the sour cream with the egg in the soup, and that will give it more body. So if you don't have meat in the soup and you only probably have lettuce, for instance, you add that kind of. That looks really interesting, actually. That's what I'm going to try. Turba de salata. It's so seasonal. It's when the salad, it's seasonal. We eat salad like in any way. So because once it starts to grow, you end up with so much lettuce. One thing I'm not familiar with, and I know my family weren't, because of the geography, was the Romanian attitude to seafood. I know up in the north there was carp or crap, was it? You'd see sold in markets. But the seafood, I don't know anything about the Romanian traditions with seafood. We eat a lot of freshwater fish, actually. Yes, because we have so many rivers, and trout is very popular. And we also eat, smoked fish as well. So we smoke to preserve it. Carp and trout are really popular. And all of the rest of the fish that is freshwater fish. And also we eat anchovies, from the Black Sea. Black Sea is not a sea that has a lot of diverse fish in it, because it's called Black Sea. There's only life around the coastlines, but when it's the deepest sea, there is no life, there is no seafood there. So we rely on freshwater fish, which was, and obviously in the Danube Delta, which is absolutely stunning, and it's a UNESCO site, listed as a World Heritage because it's unique. The Danube Delta, again, has a lot of freshwater fish there. And everything in the Danube, in that area, is cooked with fish. So if, let's say, a national dish, a dish that we love across the country, is made with pork, in the Danube is made with fish.
Right.
So for instance, in my book, I have a ciorba, a broth with meatballs, ciorba de perișoare. In the Danube, people will make that with fish balls, let's put it this way, instead of meatballs. Everything, stuffed peppers, for instance. In the rest of the country, we would use meat, whether pork with beef. In the Danube, people will cook it with fish. Everything is with fish. So we have also something that we call saramură, and saramură, as the name says, it's the beginning is related to salt.
Yes.
You cook the fish in salt, and then you put it in a broth made with, again, some salt and some chili peppers, some spices. Or you don't cook the fish in salt, you just make this brine. It's a briny broth, actually, and it's not necessarily for eating as it is, just the broth. It's for seasoning the fish, basically.
Right.
And you add the polenta to it, and that saltiness from the broth basically seasons all the elements in the dish. And that is called saramură. And the basic way to serve saramură is with this briny broth and polenta. Obviously, there are so many cultures in Dobroja and in the Delta, in the southeast of Romania. So sometimes we have another version of this saramură with chopped tomatoes and chopped peppers, something that we would have in the garden anyway, in the vegetable garden. So, but usually the fish is freshwater fish, which this is the thing that I struggled with when I wrote the book, because I couldn't use freshwater fish. The publisher and the team involved, because, you know, it's not just me writing the book, it's a whole team, and they all have their own expertise.
Yes.
They said that freshwater fish is not that available, and obviously not that available in the UK, and not available in the US necessarily. So I had to cook some of the dishes with anchovy. I selected the dishes that I was able to put. So I used trout because trout is available, but then I use mackerel for saramură, because mackerel is gorgeous on a grill. So instead of carp, and I use anchovies. Luckily, I found anchovies, and I was able to put that recipe there.
Yeah, we're getting better. It's funny. During lockdown, I do love, when I can get good fish. I just think there's nothing better. But I introduced my mother-in-law first time in her life things like the Dover sole.
Yes.
And it was like, she said, this doesn't taste like fish. I thought, yeah, but that's the idea. While seeing her face, I got a sea bass. It was a wild run sea bass, and I made sea bass fish fingers and homemade tartar sauce. And I've got to try that. It was wonderful watching her face. But prawns was something that she would never have had in Maramuresh. Or like, it's different now. And I had a phone call. Her grandson's been staying with her, and I was very proud. She asked her grandson to go out if he could buy her some prawns. She fancied some prawns. So I thought it goes to show that the food doesn't matter how old you are. If you have an open mind and open palate.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think crayfish somehow we eat in Romania, but I don't think they would be not popular or available in Maramuresh. So
it's the supermarkets now. I think over the past 15 years. I mean, I've noticed this when I first cooked my Christmas dinner there. It really was there wasn't the facility to guarantee to. There was the supermarket then back in 2007. It was still, I don't know. It was basic, very basic. But yes. Now, there's a couple of big supermarkets where actually it's changed an awful lot. You can get anything really up in Maramuresh now. Yeah, the fish is frozen, the prawns are frozen, but people are more familiar with them.
Yes. And it's funny how people tend to think that these the food in the supermarket, it's fancy, and you kind of get those when you have a special guest. I mean, I remember my auntie, when I visit Bucharest and I go to stay there with her, she says, "Oh, I bought this little tomatoes, cherry tomatoes from the supermarket because they're the best, you know." And I say, "No, I want Romanian tomatoes. Go back to the market."
The ones in the market that are full of flavour. No, I agree. But one thing I'm shocked as well, it's the cost of food in Romania in the supermarkets. It's comparable to the UK, and I know wages aren't. You know, it's the same thing. I'm always shocked with the cost of fuel in Romania.
Yes.
How people manage to run a car. It's hard, you know, but then I go to the market, which I always do. My trip before I come back is I go to the market in Sighet to buy my paprika and my socks for the motorcycle. My garlic. I buy a lot of seeds as well in the market for things like the melons and the squashes.
Oh, yes.
They grow so well. And, you know, the little newspaper cones of the seeds I can bring back and grow. But again, the supermarkets, again, it's expensive. And I don't think people's wages have quite caught up with that.
No, not at all. This is a major issue at home. Like, everything is very expensive, but the salaries are not at all at the same level. And, you know, it's very hard to have a family of 4, for instance, to feed and to, you know, to make sure that you have everything they need, you know, because it's not always food. Everything else is very expensive, clothing and everything. So, but, you know, we'll get there. And also, if we go back to our traditional way of eating, and if we go back, if we have the possibility to grow our own, you know, to have like vegetable plots, like we have here in the UK. I mean, sometimes people live in an apartment in the city, but they have a vegetable plot and they go there and plant their tomatoes and potatoes and everything. So it is possible living in a city to have homegrown produce. And, you know, we need
better, it's cheaper, it's sustainable. It's funny, isn't it? I think that life somehow is going full circle. And I think the lockdown has proved that, really. But no, I'm quite, you know, at the moment, I'm quite envious of my family in Romania. Because I've, you know, being the UK now in this lockdown, we're kind of quite stuck.
Yes, we are.
And it's quite harsh, but I don't know, up in Romania, you know, like their Christmas this year was an awful lot more sociable and vibrant than ours was. And I, you know, I know we always do Romanian Christmas Eve.
Yes, we do the same.
Yeah, and I force everybody to have turkey and the trimmings on Christmas Day, and I'm very much on my own with that one. But even this year, I know it was difficult. We did Romanian Christmas Eve, just the two of us. First Christmas we were in. My wife was here. It's about 2007, and I went to pick the turkey up from the butcher's. And she said, "Well, can you pick the pig's trotters up?" What? And of course, again, New Year's Eve wasn't New Year's Eve without the pig's trotters, and she makes prawn in jelly.
Piftie.
Yeah, I remember saying to the butcher, "I've got it pig's trotters." He went, "What?" I said, "Well, yeah, we've got." So you go on, you can have them. So every year, I always had to get the trotters in.
It's obviously at home, all these things are available. Even in like a butcher shop, they have all this, like the rind, the trotters, the ears, everything you need to prepare everything, you know. And it was a shock for me as well to come here and actually not to be able to find these in the shop. Even things like liver, you know, you can find it somewhere, but it's not necessarily all over the place. Or the other things, you know, that we have, I don't know, gizzards or giblets, you know, things like that. It's not easy to find those. And again, I had to go to my local butcher and I say, "Can I have some trotters?" And he said, "No, we don't even see those. They come from the abattoir without the trotters."
But I mean, I think most butchers now, that, you know, to compete with the supermarkets, they've had to diversify.
Yes.
You make friends with your local butcher,
Yes.
They'll get you what you want. And
Yes,
say
we cure this lardo at home, slanina, but the cut in Romania is different. It's from the back of the pig and it's quite thick.
it's the back fat.
While when I first said, can I have some fat with the rind on to cure it, they gave me something really thin.
Yeah.
Just with the rind. And I said, no, I want it from the back. And I explained, and he said, oh, okay, I'll see what I can do. So they gave me something for me to cure it at home, and I actually to be able to put it in the book as a recipe as well.
Yes.
Because it's so important to our cuisine that I really wanted to put. And I was happy the publisher was kind of agreed to put this recipe in.
Yeah, I got to admit, I bring mine back from Romania. That's on the list with me. That's on the list with the paprika. No, I do miss Romania, and again, you know, all credit to you for producing this book, because I think it's accessible. There's enough in there to satisfy somebody who has a sophisticated palate, and by that I mean sophisticated in terms of, I don't know, of like simply like good food, you know.
Yes.
Methods of producing it. It's interesting, and there's an awful lot I'd like to cook in there too.
No, I'm glad to hear. This is such a compliment. It's thank you very much. It's I wanted to keep the recipes as authentic as possible, and also fit the brief to use only ingredients that are available.
Yes.
So obviously, sometimes I had to replace our Romanian cașcaval with cheddar cheese, because there's, you know, similarities. I had to replace the brânză de vaci with ricotta, because people can find ricotta, but they can't find brânză de vaci.
Yeah.
So I had to make some compromises, but I was keen to put as many as possible, as many traditional recipes as possible. And I wasn't able to put the tripe ciorba, the tripe soup.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do that. But perhaps in another book, I don't know. I would love to, because it's not that bad. But I was able to put so many other recipes, and it's actually, as you said, it kind of whets the appetite, not only for food, but for getting to know us as Romanians better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yes, and kind of make people understand where Romania is, why we eat the way we eat, a bit about history. And, you know, it's basically, this is what I wanted to create with the book, an opportunity for people to get to know us better than what they can read in the media sometimes.
Absolutely. I think, you know, I've always tried to, and collectively myself with Si, we've always tried to show the side of Romania, you know, the side that we know and love. And obviously it's the biggest, most influential thing in my life. You know, my life is, but, you know, Romanians need to shout from the rooftops about their culture. Romanians need to be proud of their country. And you know, it's only then with books like this, I suppose, with the conversations we're having now, with showing Romania on the telly how it is, the real Romania, that's what people need to know in Europe, you know. And Romania, fortunately, I think is part of Europe.
Yes.
Big part of Europe, and you're better off than the British are at the minute. But no, it's things like this, the culture, the size of the country, the geography, the diversity. Somehow, you know, I think it's a treasure that people need to discover. And the more people that visit Romania, I think the better. It's better for money, it's better for the culture, the people. You know, you want people to go to Romania, not leave Romania.
Yes. And I want people to go back to Romania as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will. But other things, it's like people meet people, get married, get settled, kids got to start school, and it's hard. You know, but life, I don't know. I think modern life is if you can remember your roots and love them, and you know, and be mobile. You know, you know, and I think learn from each other and accept the treasure that we've all got to offer.
Yes.
It's the great thing about the food world. And I think in Britain as well, you know, it's interesting now, all the Asian food that we can buy anything to make a curry in our supermarkets. You know, it's so easy. Thai food, Chinese food, it's so easy for us now. And I think that's the way, and as with Polish food now.
Yes.
And I think I stick up for Britain in that respect. We have embraced other food cultures. But Romania's, till you've got your book, it's been laxing. It's been remiss in telling its story, I think.
Yes. So I hope I managed to kind of encourage more people, Romanians who live abroad, to be very proud of the fact that they are Romanians, and also to cook Romanian, and to tell their friends and their new families about Romanian cuisine. Because this is, you know, we need to be very proud of who we are, and we're not very often this happens. Not very often you see Romanians, you know, being very proud of who they are. So I like to think that this book is a beginning, and it will encourage a lot of people to go back to their roots and cook Romanian wherever they are in the world.
Yeah, spread the love. I think as well is, I don't know anybody in the UK who's actually been to Romania hasn't had a good time. It is true. You know, people who do actually go there, experience the country and the people. People have a wonderful time. It's part of the world that is geographically, it's stunning. The culture, the food, it's a little gem, really. Anyway, I'm biased.
Me too.
I think I need to go and cook something now.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for accepting to do this interview. I know you're very, very busy, and you know, it has been a pleasure to talk to you about the book and Romanian cuisine. And I hope we can meet again, and I hope I'll meet Liliana as well, and to talk about Romanian cuisine with her. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. I'm really grateful.
You're welcome, Irina. And it is a wonderful book, and maybe hopefully one day we'll get around the table together. And then goodness knows how long we'll talk for if the palinca and the tweaker starts to flow. Congratulations and well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.